Up next on Way of the Renaissance Man, a curious conversation continues with two of the nation's leading business consultants. Welcome to today's special media appearance from Way of the Renaissance Man, starring Jim Woods. We continue the curious conversation from Jim's appearance with Gabe Batista and Dr. Speed Selling, John Paul Menjocha, from the Position to Win podcast and book, Position to Win. Here, we present the second part of Jim's appearance of the three-part series.
This is part two.
Let's listen in.
With the legendary, the unique, the only Jim Woods, our Renaissance man, and stock picker, stock analyst, stock newsletter, top newsletter writer, and a man of many worlds. We'll be talking economy, we'll be talking markets, we'll be talking COVID. In this part of the conversation, we're going to dive into, if you have not been living in Iraq, you know about the GameStop mania and the GameStop craziness out there, the GME short squeeze. We're going to talk about what is a short squeeze, and we're going to talk about how these guys, these Reddit rascals, as Jim calls them, got together to screw the hedge fund managers, or did they? Right? We're going to hear from somebody who's actually worked at a hedge fund and who actually has real knowledge about this, not like all those pundits on TV who they may have some ideas about politics, but they sure as heck don't know anything about finance. So without further ado, let's dive in with the one and only Jim Woods.
Jim is really, I just want to point out a very important distinction, that whatever Jim's personal beliefs are, whatever he believes is right or wrong, what he's really doing, though, is he's separating that personal sense of what is right or wrong to how do I take the circumstance and situation that I'm faced with, and how do I use that to my advantage? How do I go out and make money? And because I know there's a lot of people, a lot of you out there who are not happy with whatever result just happened, and therefore you're going to do some dumb things based upon that emotional response. And I've got a quick story that Jim will, I think you'll get a little bit of and Gabe will too, but you'll get a little bit of an angst. My father-in-law got the biggest check of his life. He had worked at Ford Motor Company and, union guy, and by circumstances, he sells a piece of property, gets the biggest check he ever got in his life. I mean, six figures. I mean, this is like, wow. And, again, I was much younger, and I said to him, so what are you going to do with that money? Well, I'm kind of looking at my options, look what I'm going to do. And I said, do you realize that this will tell you exactly when it was going on? 30-year treasuries were 17%. That was that was par, that was face rate. And I said, why don't you take like all of it or most of it and buy 30-year treasuries? And he goes, well, I don't know, because, what if the U.S. government goes broke? And I said, well, if they go broke, we're all screwed. Okay. The whole ship goes down. So what he does is he goes over and sees his banker. Well, all I can say is he didn't really have a banker, like Jamie Dimon didn't have him come over and sit down or something. It was a guy who was
who's Jamie Dimon, John?
Jamie Dimon is the CEO of JP Morgan, and he is probably one of the best financial minds in the industry.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough to meet him once, and he has that kind of, that kind of gravitas that you want to be around. He's just a very brilliant man.
So he didn't have Jamie Dimon in his thing. He had the guy who had the cubicle glassed in office, and the guy pitches him that if he gives them lots of money, not all of it, that he's going to get 12%, not 17%. He's going to lock up his money for 3 years, but if he locks it up for 5 years in a CD, they're going to give him a television. Now, all I can tell you is that the beauty of, for those of you who don't know, if he had purchased those bonds, first off, those bonds are non-callable. That means the federal government paid those out for 30 years. Also, those bonds went through the roof when interest rates went from 17 to eventually with Ronald Reagan, I think they went down to like 8 or 9%. So I don't know what the capital gains would have been in that, but it would have been quite significant. But there was an example of his emotional response to the conditions of what were going on stopped him from doing something which made a lot of sense. So Jim is making a very good point, and he's living with this is the interesting thing is I meet a lot of people who have done very well, but Jim has this kind of interesting duality that he can separate what he thinks you should do in the market versus what his own personal beliefs are.
Mhm.
And he isn't like so many people who have their personal beliefs are, it's all going to hell in a handbasket. So we start canning peaches,
Yeah.
filling sandbags, and putting the money in God knows what.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I mean, that's a beautiful story too, because it's the problem with making a decision based on your personal bias, and a lot of times is there's two ways of looking at reality. There's the way things ought to be, and there's the way things are. Now, philosophically speaking, you can fight for a world where the world becomes the way things ought to be. Okay. And I recommend people do that. You want to be with the way things ought to be. But when you're making decisions about your reality now, especially when it comes to money,
Yep.
you want to act based on the way things are. Okay. Like, for example, we have a president now, Democrat president, moderate liberal. We have a Congress that's all Democratic. Okay. And we have administration policy that's going to be more liberal than the prior administration. Okay. So what does that mean? That means different priorities. That means different focuses, different government money, and different, emphasis on things like green energy, things like electric vehicles, things like the different sectors like China, like policy towards China and other countries going to be different. So how do we look at that? Well, you could say, well, I don't think this green energy thing is very, that I think it's a bogus. Global warming is not true or whatever.
Sure.
You can think that if you want, but then if you don't buy solar stocks, you're missing out on a pot full of money, because that's where there's going to be a lot of action. Okay. And so my admonition to listeners is invest in the real world. And if you want to try to make your world into like something that your ideal notion of what things are, work for that as well. But use the money, you make, from the real world to help fund the things that you want to change, and vice versa, because the world is as it is, and you can either wish it to be different or you can take advantage of the way it is. We were talking about the Federal Reserve and we were talking about Congress and fiscal stimulus. So both of those things are going to be those are two of the legs there that are going to kind of drive the markets up. And we were talking about what's going to happen 2021 and beyond. So those two things are still going to be operational. They're going to be there are going to be two tailwinds that are going to drive stocks higher. Now, there's another leg of the kind of the bullish thesis, which is vaccine optimism / COVID normalcy, a return to normalcy. So right now we have two major manufacturers that are, that have where the vaccines are being used right now. And we're actually starting to see the numbers, COVID cases, hospitalizations, deaths go down. Okay. For the first time in a while, things are starting to open up where I am in California. Finally, you can go to a restaurant again, and for many months there, we basically couldn't. So there's that. And that's going to hopefully as more and more vaccines come out, there's AstraZeneca one that's going to be approved soon. There's the Johnson & Johnson one. And although the Johnson & Johnson one has got an effectiveness rate, which is not as high as like the Moderna or the Pfizer one, it's still high enough to help blunt that whole, the whole like kind of COVID like contagion rates, and so the more vaccines out there, the more people get, the better it's going to be in terms of like, numbers. And the better the numbers get, the more the economy is going to go, and the more people are going to get back to work, and the more corporate earnings we're going to see. And that whole thing is it's going to have a spiral effect. So you have like a lot of pent up demand for things like airline, like, I want to go on vacation. I want to go fly. I want to go to resorts. I want to go to, I was never a cruise line guy, but they're very popular, and people want to do that too at some point. People want to stay at hotels. People want to do things, they want to go to restaurants, and they're going to do that. Amusement parks, things like that. And at the same time, you have all these like kind of stay at home stocks that are still going to do well. Netflix, Disney through its Hulu and Disney Plus and all these things, these streaming services, all these different, food deliveries, things like Zoom, which we're talking on right now. That's not going away. That's going to be permanent. Now, are we going to see a big jump in Zoom stock this year like we did last year? Highly doubtful. But there's going to be plenty of stocks out there that you can buy that are going to be taking advantage of the new normal, so to speak, and the new situation. Like one of the stocks I like, this is a free stock pick for people. It's called Shopify, and the ticker symbol is SHOP. And that stock has been up huge. It's up, my subscribers are up like almost, I think 70 or 80% now, depending, since earlier this year, because we saw that people needed to race to get an online presence when everything shut down in order to do some business. Shopify is the easiest way to do that. I use Shopify at my own website, at the wayoftherenaissanceman.com website for all my merchandise. So, and it's the easiest thing ever. And they basically supply all the software for a back end store, merchant type software, and it was easy to set up, and it works brilliantly. So it's no wonder a stock like that has done well and will keep doing well, So that's just the kind of way to look at things. You look at the current conditions and you see, well, where's their opportunity, and then you look at the numbers and see, well, hey, there's this opportunity is playing out. Right. And then you decide to put your money to work with these kind of companies. So
yeah, and the COVID vaccine issue is just an example. So yesterday my wife got her first shot. So she got Moderna.
Good.
And then they laid out for the next month, and it is Thunderdome trying to get an appointment. So anybody who's listening to this, all I can tell you is that you want to, and again, I'm a non-caffeine guy, but you want to just go get yourself a couple of espressos and just start working websites to see if you can get an appointment. If you're in the right group, and my guess is that you will be ahead of the mob who are waiting with wrong information to go and get it. However, every time somebody gets it, yesterday she got it, and she said, "Okay, now let's plan." So, I don't have it. I don't fit the right risk group, and she said, "Okay, now let's start planning our vacations for the year." So she's already started that, whereas we've been in lockdown since last year. Again, cardiologist said, "Hey, don't get this. This would be really bad news." So for all of you who are out there, this is a real thing. And what Jim just talked about, this isn't a theoretical, and this is going to not be it. I liken it to the vaccine is going to be like, I'm up in a high alpine meadow in Colorado, and the whole thing is just in July, it's just a bog because all that ice is just melting. But it isn't like there's a torrential river. That's farther down the mountain. It's just seeping and seeping and seeping. And I think that's what you're going to see during this process.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that the vaccine, and I mean, first of all, I am pro-vaccine. I'm pro-science, pro-vaccine. Okay. So, I mean, there's some problems with vaccines, and there has been, and there's always problems with some kind of medical situation. Hey, some people react negatively to these things, but the idea that, that the conspiratorial idea that vaccines are some kind of deep state, Bill Gates conspiracy to track people and stuff like that. This is ridiculous. You don't want to like base your ideas on silly conspiratorial notions. You want to base your life and your ideas on the best and most rational scientific information you can find. Now, does that mean you have to be a scientist? No, not ever, of course not. But you have to know, like, when somebody doesn't have any information and just throwing out some stupid theory about it, and then they're acting on that theory. That's the problem. You can believe something, you can be skeptical of things, but if you start acting on things that are irrational, you're not only going to hurt yourself, you're going to hurt the rest of us.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't do that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right. So thanks for that perspective. All right, Gabe, I know this is the one that you and I've been talking a lot about. We watched this train wreck. I mean, we watched this calamity go on. So we'll get Jim's professional opinion, because we're amateurs, but we definitely watched it. And it reminded me so much of the feeding frenzies that I would see in Vegas when people would go crazy on getting into some kind of, hey, this is the hot streak, and they would rush over. So, all right, lay it on.
So we want to get Jim's opinion on the GME short squeeze, and how did that happen from somebody that has actually worked at hedge funds, right? Has actually done some of this stuff, not from some of these. I heard all kinds of opinions from pundits and all sides of the political spectrum that obviously don't understand what they were talking about. They were just, they were given the story, and I guess they must have an opinion, so they just said it. But before we do that, go check out positionwinbook.com, which is the website of this podcast. And there you can find links for interviews, for the book. Also, we have out there is the Remote Work for a Better World, which is available on Amazon. So definitely go out there, go on Amazon. If you haven't gotten the book, go get it. Go check out positionwinbook.com. And then you can, get in touch and give us some feedback about the podcast. Tell us what you think. And yeah, we're listening. So we thank you. We get downloads and people find us. And so we appreciate that.
Don't forget that we have a Facebook group also, Position to Win.
That's right.
Yeah.
You can find it there in positionwinbook.com. You'll find the Facebook group there too, if you want to join as well.
Okay.
Before we talk about GameStop, I mean, this may seem like a shameless cross promotion, but I highly recommend everyone go to that, get that book. It's well written. It's like, it's just got the cool like vibe to it that where you're going to learn something. And I love that. Anything that teaches me something that I didn't know and allows me to help implement it in my own life. I love it. So you guys did a great job of that. Thank you. Thank you both.
Well, thank you, Jim. And I really appreciate it. In fact, Jim was like, at that big bang point, because we actually went to his undisclosed hidden bunker about 11 months ago and he did a podcast with us. We did a podcast with him and recorded it. And we literally left that secret location, and Gabe and I got on a Zoom call, and we had to join it via phone, and we hatched Remote Work for a Better World, which we, from that day until we had it up on Amazon, after we fought with the forces of evil, Jeff Bezos, it was 17 days. And it was literally part of what it was is that talking to Jim and this whole COVID thing is that the spam was hitting the fan, and we're like, and this wasn't in the podcast, but it's like, hey, Jim, do you think this thing is real? And Jim's like, oh, I think it's real. It's the big tsunami. So anyway, Jim, thanks. You don't even know that you were part of that original bang.
I did not know that. I now I want my royalty check. I haven't seen that yet. What's up?
Well, it's like Hollywood. There is no net, Jim.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you're giving me net points, not gross points. Right?
Oh yeah. You've got a lot of net points right there.
Yeah, we got you. As soon as the money shows up, we got you.
Yeah,
that's the thing, and that's a whole told Hollywood to count, and then what happens is, well, just so people know what we're laughing about. So in Hollywood, if you like someone like an actor will get gross points, meaning they'll get like percentage of the gross of the movie. Now they know how to do that with gross points. Whereas before they used to say, well, you'll get like, you'll get like net points. Like, so whatever the net result, like the net, profit is for this movie, you get a percentage of that. Right. But Hollywood accountants, will like include like a ladder that they used in the production, and they'll write that off. They'll write everything off in the whole studio. They'll write everyone on the whole. So there'll be no net profit. Meanwhile, they've used that same ladder for the last 25 years. It gets written off every year. That same truck that he uses, like, it's been around for 10 years.
How many ladders have we bought?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, we need cables, we need craft services. I mean, it's everything. So, yeah. Okay. So, all right, the net points. All right. Now I know what I'm getting.
Yeah. Well, and just as a little bit of a cherry and some nuts on that Sunday, is that my wife's best friend's daughter, if you can kind of work through that, she ends up becoming a TV writer and marries this guy as a producer, and they actually had at one time 3 shows on cable TV, and they've done very well for themselves. And we're sitting there at dinner, and he goes, yeah, the saying in Hollywood is that you want Rocky money. And I said,
Yes.
what are you talking about? And he goes, well, Rocky cost $4 million to make. But Sylvester Stallone basically by hook or by crook did and owned it. And Rocky made so much money, $100 million in the original release, that even the Hollywood accountants couldn't hide the money. So you want Rocky money.
Yeah,
so that's what you want.
Yeah, it's Rocky money. Yeah, that success story is actually quite a beautiful story. Stallone he wrote that script for Rocky, and he wanted to be the star of it, and wanted to be that he wanted it to be his vehicle. And he was offered a lot of money for that script for other actors to play the lead role, other actors to play Rocky. And he's like, no, I'm Rocky. I'm not. And he didn't, and he had no money. He was like living in an apartment in like, in Hollywood or something, like 1 bedroom, and he had no money. He was just a kind of a struggling guy trying to sell the script. And they were offering him a lot of money, like several $100,000 back in the 70s, which is that's a lot of dough back then, and because they knew the script was a winner. But he said, no, it's just my project or nothing. So he stuck to his guns, and now look what happened. He's one of the most successful movie stars in history, so you got to give that guy some big props for having the big cojones enough to like stick to his guns on that, and that's actually a great lesson for people. If you really believe in something, don't sell it short, as it were. And that brings us around to the short sell.
Yep. That's a great segue, Jim. See, this is why we have you. This is why we bring you like this. You got this whole thing figured out. I had no idea. Right. Here you go saying, well, what are we going to talk about? It's like, you're like, bam, you would know what we're going to talk about. So exactly. Don't sell yourself short, but sometimes you do sell stuff short. So we ended up with this whole thing at GME, and most people don't know what the heck is happening. And then also what more than that, what the repercussions is of what this is, this crowd is almost like a crowdsource funding / social media / screw, these guys, and we collectivize our decision making and pump up the stock. Wow, this is crazy.
Yeah, I call it a financial flash mob. Remember those flash mobs things that were happening like a few years ago? People would say like, hey, everyone meet up at the local, liquor store, and we're gonna go in there. I'm just gonna raid the place or whatever, or shoe store or whatever. Kids were doing that for a while there, and then they were able to connect through social media and get these flash mobs, and they're actually quite dangerous for like some of the more criminal element ones. Sure. Other ones were just people getting together and dancing in the street and having fun, flash mob. But
I was going to say that I saw one of those in Houston, but Kanye West did a pop-up, and he did it at the Galleria, and he did a flash mob for that. And they had like 1,800 people show up and he just milked that cow. It was amazing because of course, the deal is that they wouldn't even let you through the door to see the merch unless you made a commitment to spend $100. And it was like genius, man. It was just genius to watch this happen because and they used the flash mob concept for that. So
yeah, there's a reason why Kanye is worth, over 100 mil.
Exactly.
He's a good businessman,
That's it.
So, okay. So let's talk about this GME thing. So
which is GameStop for everybody.
Yes, GameStop is a, for just in the, out of the necessity of thoroughness. Let's go through it a little bit. So GameStop has been a retail video game store in malls for years. People used to go there and get the latest game. Like I'm not a gamer. I've never been a gamer, but I know people go crazy off these things. They love all the different games. They love all the different, things.
And it's a huge industry.
It's a huge industry, and there's a lot of profits, and there's a lot of, not only are there a lot of profits, but there's a lot of like the side areas like that make the gaming possible, like graphic chips for the computers and stuff. Things like stocks like Nvidia. That's one of the stocks I love. That's your second bonus pick, NVIDIA. But they make those graphic chips that make computer graphics possible, and the more graphically oriented these games have become, the more they need these big chips to support it. So aside from that, GameStop was a company that did well for a long time, but then people were able to get these games online. Okay. So why would you want to physically go to a store and buy a CD for your game when you can just download it, play it online? So GameStop found themselves like in the position that so many other companies found themselves in, which is they were in the wrong market at the wrong time, because people were deciding to vote with their feet and go online for these games and not actually to the mall or to the store. A lot of retailers are having the same problem. Amazon took over, with retail sales versus going to physical stores. And then when the pandemic hit, people definitely couldn't go. So yeah.
Well, can I point out a little side thing that the publishers of games loved going, and originally they were afraid to go online, but then they realized if you pump this out on a CD or a DVD, somebody can play that game, get through with it, get tired of it, take it to GameStop, exchange it for something else, and then you actually limit it. But if you do a download and you have a key, unless you go and break, do a jailbreak, essentially you just bought something that just is now a digital doorstop, because you can't actually pass that on to somebody.
Right.
So once the publishers figured that out, they went, wait a second, why have we been opposed to this downloading thing? No. I mean, am I hitting it right though? Because that's like the hidden.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, the publishers figured it out, and like everyone, see, that's actually a good point to kind of delve into the wider issues of these things, because companies adapt, humans adapts, nature adapts to whatever conditions that they're out there. And as an investor, you need to adapt, because if you don't, you think, hey, I know I'm going to buy this stock and that's it. I love it. You're going to be in trouble. Now, GameStop was one of those stocks that did really well for a long time, but if you're in it, you made a lot of money. But when you saw the kind of the writing on the wall with all these different transitions and, like the game publishers realizing these things. And then also the lack of people going to malls to shop. And then the pandemic, so the stock started going down.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a smart investor, you got out of there. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Big companies, like big money players, hedge funds, pension funds, I don't know about pension funds, but hedge funds,
sure,
and other big traditional people that sell short saw the same thing that we just talked about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, this stock is going to go down. We think it's going to go down. So just so people know, a short sale is basically when you are anticipating a stock to go down. So the term is you're short selling it, meaning you're basically borrowing the number of shares, a number of shares, or kind of you have like you're basically taking shares that you don't own and you're selling them in the open market for a certain price, and then you're hoping to replace those shares at a lower price, and that's where you get the profit. So, you borrow the shares at 100, you sell them in the open market, you want them to go down to like 60 or 70 or whatever, 50. Let's say it goes down to 50, you buy it back for 50, replace the shares.
Yep.
And then the difference is you made, like in that case, in that example, you made $50 a share.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a lot of, on Wall Street, there's a lot of people that take big hedge fund positions, okay, big positions that they think where they're shorting the stock heavily. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a metric called short interest, which just means that's the amount of short interest, short sellers out there in the market. And the funny thing about it is that number can be actually more than the actual float of the stock.
Yeah, that's one of the questions, right? How can they short 140% of the available
GameStop,
stocks?
Exactly. And GameStop, it's a great question. People have asked me that, and I even saw some people on financial news not knowing. They're like, I don't know how that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys are like professionals. I'm like, that's kind of easy to explain, but I mean, they didn't seem to know how to explain it. So I will explain it for you right now. So what happens is a lot of people borrow shares from, like they say, I want to borrow the shares from their broker, but they don't actually take possession of that. It's just like a kind of a what they call a synthetic commitment
mm-hmm.
to have those shares out there, and they're kind of out there in the open market that they own. But it's not like they actually physically took the shares and then sold them to someone else. It's just like more of a paper commitment, like
Sure.
an obligation that you're
Mm-hmm.
making. And so when everybody's shorting a stock, and there's so many like people that want to short it, that's what happens. You might have 2 or 3 people kind of shorting the same block of stock, basically.
Sure.
So it can get, it can get to it. The numbers can grow crazy. Now, it usually doesn't happen. It only happens in these big short kind of positions.
Mm-hmm.
And most
is it because they're not coordinated, so they don't really
they're not
know
coordinated.
The total? Yeah.
Exactly. No one. It's not a 1-for-1 coordination.
And Jim, just to make sure, I think there's a piece that's left out in these discussions, but I know that we all 3 of us know it, but maybe our listeners don't know, is that when you borrow those shares, you actually have to put up a chunk of money to borrow their shares. Because if not, I mean, I could call, my broker and say, hey, I want to borrow an infinite number of shares. And he'd go, oh yeah, hey, that's probably not a bad idea. But it's actually, you have to post a number. You have to send, you have to give them money. And in essence, it's a margin deal. So maybe you can explain a little bit of that, because I think a lot of people don't understand that you really are at risk when you're doing short selling. It isn't like there's this cool free lunch.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, there's the if you didn't have to put money, it's referred to sometimes as a naked short,
Mm-hmm.
Meaning like you don't even own, you have no stake at it, but then you have to actually at some point cover that. But yeah, I mean, if you want to short, you usually have to have like what's called a margin account, which means you have to put up to like maybe half or so of the the purchase price on either on a regular long buy or a short sell. So you have to have some money in your account to to kind of cover these buys. But because it's what's called a margin account, you can borrow from your broker like at an interest rate, like the necessary money to cover that buy. Okay. So which adds a little layer of complication to it, because if you are wrong on something and you need to cover that short, then the margin call comes in. And that's when you have to actually man up and buy the stock at whatever price they demand you buy it at. So what happens was, just to track back. So if you expect the stock to go down, you borrow the shares, and you try to go short the stock. Okay. And so that was working for a while. There was a lot of outstanding shorts in GameStop, and some of these other heavily shorted stocks like AMC was the second most. Then there was Best Buy, there's VIR pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of different stocks that got caught up in this whole, short selling kind of frenzy thing. And the reason why is because all these companies, the fundamentals were crap.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
And they were like, it was a logical thing.
It was, it makes sense. Exactly.
It made sense from a long-term kind of, or from not a long-term, but from a analysis
fundamentals.
from a fundamentals perspective and an analysis perspective. These companies, these hedge funds aren't stupid. They saw the writing on the wall there and they went short. Now, here's the problem. If you have to, for some reason, you have to cover your shorts, meaning you have to buy the shares at whatever price the market has, then you have to buy it back, and you have to buy it back maybe at a loss. Okay. And because of that margin thing, by like 140%, or just the more shorts are out there, there's not enough shares to cover the shorts. So when there's a scarcity of something and everybody wants it, what happens?
Yes, it's even more. It's a layer into the price increase as well.
Exactly. It's a supply and demand thing. So it becomes like a reverse, like, tulip mania kind of situation where everybody wants to own it no matter what the cost is. Right. And when you have these brokers, like we mentioned, the margin account, a lot of these like places were like demanding, we're calling in your margins. They're saying, hey, you're way down in this position because you have to replace the shares at 100, but the shares are at 200.
Sure.
So
you better start buying now.
You better start buying now, or else we're gonna call your margin in. And so that's what happened. And when you get a lot of big players out there who are short a stock, and the stock starts running up, say, hey, we got to cover these shorts.
Yeah.
And that's what kept driving the price of these stocks up. Now, but here's the thing: what happened? What was the impetus for all the buying that caused the price to go up? And that is one thing that's new in the markets. And it's that whole Reddit social media. I call it the Reddit rascals. There's a lot of different terms for it, depending on what side of what side of the ledger you're on. I mean, I give anyone credit for making money in the markets.
Absolutely.
And I'm actually pro Reddit rascal, because the Reddit rascals looked there and they saw an opportunity, and they said, hey, here's an opportunity for us to take some collective action, buy these stocks at a certain time. The price will go up because it's so heavily shorted. These companies will have to start covering their shorts, because they're going to get margin calls. They're going to have to, they're going to have to they don't want to lose money.
Yeah.
So
was there a way to tell that the stock was shorted over 100%?
Yeah, you can tell by that metric I mentioned earlier, the short interest.
The short interest.
It's published. It's published. Anybody could find out the short interest.
So the short interest is of all time, or at the present time of that stock. Okay, and then you can compare that with the short interest with the number of shares. Or
yes, the data out there of short interest it comes in either a percentage, like you say, how many shares of this percentage of these shares are short that are on the open market, and there's the ratios of like shorts to longs were like huge, like in the shorts for like GameStop and these other stocks. So the people that noted, they looked at the information out there, and they looked for the most heavily shorted stocks at that time. It wasn't just like historically. It was like, because the data gets published every week. So you can go out there and find it, like it's out there, like there's a lot of databases that have it. I mean, even just like, the exchanges themselves will report, because it's public information, publicly traded companies, the amount of shares that are out there is out there. The price is out there. The bid and the ask, it's all public. So they see, these guys were smart. They were able to see what stocks were most heavily shorted, what stocks are most vulnerable to what's called a short squeeze. And that's the kind of, the term du jour, so to speak, in this, because the short squeezes happens when people are squeezed into buying something that they don't want to buy back, because they don't want to, no one wants to buy something back at 200 when they bought it. They wanted to go down to 50, but they had now they have it at 100, and then they got to then now they have to buy it back at 200. That's 100% loss. So no one wants to do that, obviously. So anyway, the point is like these guys saw the opportunity right there to move a stock higher and to kind of create a multiplier effect, like a cascade effect, a catalyst effect, where these hedgies come back and try to buy the stock. And that kind of buying pressure sends the stock up big and fast.
Right.
Because and it's just the nature of the short squeeze kind of situation. Big, fast, and like on a lot of volume, because the more volume out there short, the more volume has to cover. So, and that's the key to it. Now, if you were to try to do a short squeeze in a stock that isn't heavily shorted, it wouldn't work,
Sure.
Because there wouldn't be any kind of multiplier effect by shorter people that have not that many people are short the stock. So, if you try to do a short stock on Apple right now, a Reddit short squeeze on Apple, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. Because not that many people are short.
Sure,
Apple,
sure. Yeah.
So, but the stocks that they targeted were the ones that were most heavily shorted, which is that to me that's just showing looking at an opportunity out there and saying, hey, let's try to work this game, work the system here for our own, for our own. Now, well, here's the thing though, too, if you're playing that game and it is kind of a game almost, then you can play that game, but you have to, I don't call that investing.
Right.
That's definitely not investing.
Yeah, I agree.
That's playing a game that you could win at or you could lose at. And as we saw,
it's a bluff. It's a bluff.
It's a bluff. Exactly. And it's also one of those things where, okay, some people won big.
Oh yeah.
And some people got hit big, the people that were short. But then in the subsequent days, you saw like the price move on some of these stocks, like 40-50% in a day. I mean, it was just crazy. Like they were just moving up big, and then they were down big, and the next day they were up big, down big. So the price is going to find its own kind of level. And ultimately, stocks are priced based on the future earnings prospect. And the future earnings prospect for a company like GameStop is not good.
Sure.
So you don't want to be owning GameStop as like a, core holding in your equity portfolio, because it's not that kind of stock. At one point it was a kind of stock like that, but then it changed. Things changed. You have to adapt. Now it's just a plaything for social media, Reddit rascals and stocks and, and short positions out there. Now, one thing I think people are happy about is a lot of these big hedge funds got their butts handed to them in these things. And nobody cries tears for, rich Wall Street, short sellers, because they have this misconception that if you're short selling, you're somehow like, anti-American or something like that, or you're trying to like crush the price of the stock and something. And that's just not the case. But when you saw the little guy come in as a kind of a mob and push the share price higher, and then these hedgies got caught with their pants down, so to speak. They had to pull them back up by buying all these shorts, and so it was kind of like sweet revenge, the little guy versus the big guy. And so and I'm not that type of person, I'm not like an anti-big guy or a pro like little guy versus the big guy. However, in this case, they took advantage of an opportunity,
it's an underdog.
and I give them props for it, because that's what we all want to do in life.
Thank you for listening to this reprise interview segment of Jim Woods with Gabe Batista and John Paul Mendoza from the Position to Win podcast. Remember to tune in next week to hear the final interview of the 3-part series. For more great resources and inspiration, visit wayoftherenaissanceman.com.